Hi, it's Thursday, and it has been a weird and wild week. And so I did a little bit of an explainer in Tuesday's office hour about how our class visits go and the logistics of them for people who might be interested in joining us in the future, or for teachers or other folks who are interested in having guests in their classes. So that's great. And so today was intended to do a couple of things. One, tabletop news dropped here on YouTube at exactly the start of class. So we spent the first 20 minutes taking a look at that and then talking a little bit about the rhetoric of that project and its particular style and all of those sorts of things, which of course is super interesting given that the target audience in many ways is my students. They are the kind of rising generation for whom this is targeted. And of course, it's broken up into different pieces. We talked a little bit about what YouTube does versus the other formats that the show will ultimately kind of be distributed on. So that was a really interesting discussion about the kind of state of play, literally, in the form. Then we transitioned into talking and doing a little bit of a debrief. We've had two class visitors in a row, one in person, which they're kind of old hats at, and one on Zoom, which this time we this is our second Zoom visitor. The first one was while I was at Big Bad Con, operated while I was on an iPad. So a little bit more rough and ready than when I'm here in my home office. And logistically speaking, it went well by students' feedback, and students were excitedly talking about all the ways in which they had taken the conversation from Tuesday in particular and run with it off to their friend groups and other ways in terms of thinking about storytelling and the future of the form. We spent the last part of class, and this is kind of the last part of the recap, um, transitioning from that and talking about the strengths of what a virtual guest can do. Uh, and as a way of talking about what do we want for the two unstructured weeks. So, just to give you a sense of where we are in the semester, there will be 2 weeks of what I call the Adopt a TTRPG. Students have been adopting a game, running it for their friends, or playing it if they're a solo game. And we've spent different parts of the semester asking different questions about that game. And for the next 2 weeks, we're going to be doing that pretty intensely, asking questions about like the game's genealogy, what both inspired it, as well as what games it might have inspired in turn, whether the game has won particularly kinds of recognition in terms of awards, and we'll talk a lot about how awards work in the tabletop world, as well as actual play, whether the game has been performed, whether it can be performed, whether students think it is a good candidate for that kind of performance, and a whole lot more. But then as we get closer to the end, I keep things unstructured. And as I've talked about in other videos in terms of like guests and things like that, that's part of what we can do is if students are really interested in a particular topic and I happen to know somebody who's a really good fit. So I was very clear, like we were making a wish list today that was about ideas and concepts that we wanted to cover, or possibly games, and then my job is to take the final 2 weeks before Thanksgiving break and stitch those into some meaningful combinations. So we have some real deep interest, especially since several people are doing keepsake games like Amending or a Field Guide to Memory, in materiality in games. And so my head is starting to spin about how I want to address that in the space of class. Stay tuned on that one. We're also have many teachers in the class, as I've discussed before. So educational games are something that are on students' minds. Um, possibly games with more competition elements or other kinds of friction. And that led to a discussion of dog eat dog, which I've mentioned before. And we went back and forth for a little bit today talking about whether that was something that we wanted to play together. Dog Eat Dog, for those of you who are not familiar, go to Shut Up and Sit Down's YouTube channel and you'll see a good kind of synopsis. And Shut Up and Sit Down has also done a really good review of the game for their website. Um, it is a game about colonialism and it's really intense. Um, and so uh, we decided that what we would probably end up doing was reading the reviews around the game, taking a look at the game itself as readers, but not necessarily playing that game. And I think that's a good compromise, especially for like one day of our time together at the end. So we'll see how that goes. Um, and then one student is very interested in online resources and digital tools. So things like virtual tabletops and stuff like that. This will actually kind of bring us back full circle in an interesting way to our very first guest, Josh Simons of Demiplane. So we may have some stuff to play around with, kind of practically speaking, there. Um, that may or may not also include kind of thinking about CRPGs, with kind of practically speaking there. Um, that may or may not also include kind of thinking about CRPGs. Will I figure out a way to have us take a look at Baldur's Gate 3? Maybe. Haven't decided just yet. And finally, very interested in kids TTRPGs, and I think I've got that one pretty well nailed down. Um, in addition to having run games like The Quiet Year for my young nephew and niece, I have been exploring Quest RPG in particular with them, and we have a PDF copy. It is on our perusal kind of class library. So we will probably be taking a day to explore that. I may take a look at TTRPG Kids website for some other suggestions, or possibly like doing a last minute check in after our actual play, like proper day, to think about whether we want to take a look at something like Skyjack's Courier's Call, or some of the other kind of RPG actual plays that have been targeted specifically for either all ages or for kids. Still going to mull that one over. But I think there's some interesting ways to combo that. So I've got 4 class sessions to cover a pretty wide range of ideas. And so this is the kind of, my research job while they're doing their targeted research about different TTRPGs for the next 2 weeks. My job is, by the time they get done with that, that part of the syllabus will be ready to go. I'm going to be thinking about this alongside kind of doing assessment of their grade contracts and things like that tomorrow, as I'm kind of taking those final looks and doing cleanup on the tasks that they've already completed. That will help me shape my thinking as well. So that's where we are at in this week 10 of 15, if you can believe it. So most of the rest of our semester indeed comes before Thanksgiving, and then we'll have 1 week left to kind of look over what we've done together, and also welcome our friend Taylor Moore as our final guest to class. So with that, that's the office hour in less than 10 today, which feels fitting somehow. Have a good one and enjoy the weekend. It's Thursday after all.